The spark assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated in Sarajevo. The assassin Gavrilo Princip was a Bosnian Serb nationalist. This single event set off a chain reaction. Tensions in Europe were already high, and this assassination was the spark that ignited the Great War. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, believing they were behind the assassination. This declaration triggered a series of alliances to activate. Countries that had pledged to defend one another were suddenly embroiled in conflict. The world watched in shock as nations took sides. What started as a regional conflict quickly escalated into a global war. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand was more than just a murder, it was the catalyst for one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. The causes of World War I were complex and multifaceted. Nationalism was a powerful force. Many nations wanted to assert their dominance. Each country believed they were superior. This led to a competitive and hostile environment. Alliances were another significant factor. Europe was divided into two main coalitions, the Allies and the Central Powers. These alliances meant that if one country went to war, its allies were obligated to join. This created a domino effect that pulled many nations into the conflict. Militarism also played a crucial role. Countries were building up their armies and navies. The belief was that military strength equated to national power. This arms race meant that when war did break out, it was on a massive scale unlike anything the world had seen before. The combination of nationalism, alliances, and militarism created a volatile situation. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand was just the spark that lit the fuse. The underlying causes had been building for years, making war almost inevitable. World War I saw some of the most gruesome battles in history. The Battle of the Marne in 1914 was a critical early fight. It stopped the German advance into France. The Battle of Verdun in 1916 was one of the longest and most brutal. Both sides suffered heavy casualties. The Somme, also in 1916, was another devastating battle. Strategically, World War I was a war of attrition. The horrors of these battles are still remembered today. Kaiser Wilhelm II was the German emperor during World War I. His aggressive policies and militaristic stance were significant factors in the war's outbreak. Wilhelm believed in strengthening Germany's military power, which contributed to the arms race in Europe. Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States, initially kept America out of the war. However, by 1917, he led the U.S. into the conflict to support the Allies. Wilson advocated for the League of Nations, a precursor to the United Nations, to ensure lasting peace. General John J. Pershing was the commander of the American Expeditionary Forces. He played a crucial role in the final offensives that led to the war's end. His leadership helped to bolster the morale and effectiveness of the Allied forces. Other notable figures include British Prime Minister David Lloyd George and French Premier Georges Clemenceau. Both played significant roles in the war and the subsequent peace negotiations. Their leadership and decisions shaped the course of World War I and its aftermath. Section 5. Trench Warfare and Daily Life. Trench warfare defined much of World War I. Soldiers lived and fought in trenches that stretched for miles. These trenches were muddy, cold, and filled with disease. Life in the trenches was grueling and dangerous, with constant threats of enemy attacks and shelling. The conditions were harsh. Soldiers had to deal with lice, rats, and the ever-present mud. The smell of decaying bodies and the sound of artillery were constant companions. Despite the hardships, soldiers developed a sense of camaraderie and resilience. Daily life in the trenches involved long periods of boredom punctuated by moments of intense fear. Soldiers wrote letters, played cards, and tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. They also had to be ready to fight at a moment's notice. Trench warfare was a grueling experience that defined the Western Front. It highlighted the horrors of war and the resilience of soldiers. The stories of life in the trenches remain some of the most poignant and powerful accounts of World War I. Section 6. Technological advancements in warfare. World War I saw significant technological advancements that changed warfare forever. The use of machine guns, for example, made traditional infantry attacks deadly and ineffective. This led to the development of new tactics and strategies. Poison gas was another horrific innovation. First used by the Germans in 1915, gas attacks caused severe injuries and deaths. The use of gas masks became necessary for survival. Tanks were introduced by the British in 1916. These armored vehicles could cross trenches and rough terrain, providing a new way to break the stalemate. Aircraft also played a new role in warfare. Initially used for reconnaissance, planes soon became involved in aerial combat and bombing raids. The war also saw the beginning of submarine warfare, particularly by the German U-boats which targeted Allied shipping. These technological advancements made World War I one of the deadliest conflicts in history. They changed the face of warfare and introduced new forms of combat that would be used in future wars. The impact of these technologies was profound and far-reaching. Section 7. The role of propaganda. Propaganda played a crucial role in World War I. Governments used it to maintain morale and encourage enlistment. Posters, films, and newspapers portrayed the enemy as evil and the war as just. This helped to sustain public support for the war effort. Propaganda also aimed to dehumanize the enemy. This made it easier for soldiers and civilians to accept the brutal realities of war. By portraying the opposing side as monstrous, governments could justify the sacrifices required. Women were also targeted by propaganda. They were encouraged to support the war by working in factories or serving as nurses. Propaganda highlighted their critical role on the home front, emphasizing that their contributions were vital to the war effort. The impact of propaganda was significant. It shaped public perception and maintained support for the war. The techniques and strategies used during World War I set the stage for future conflicts where propaganda would continue to play a crucial role. Section 8. The United States enters the war. The United States initially remained neutral in World War I. However, several factors led to its eventual involvement. Unrestricted submarine warfare by Germany threatened American ships and lives. The sinking of the Lusitania in 1915, which resulted in the deaths of 128 Americans, was a significant turning point. The Zimmermann telegram also played a crucial role. This secret communication from Germany to Mexico proposed a military alliance against the United States. When the British intercepted and revealed the telegram, it fueled American anger and the desire for action. In April 1917, President Woodrow Wilson asked Congress to declare war on Germany. The U.S. entry into the war provided a much-needed boost to the Allied forces. American troops, fresh and well-supplied, helped to tip the balance in favor of the Allies. The involvement of the United States was a decisive factor in the war's outcome. It provided the Allies with additional resources and manpower. The entry of the U.S. marked a turning point that would eventually lead to the end of the conflict. Section 9. The end of the war and the Treaty of Versailles. The end of World War I was marked by a series of events that led to an armistice. By 1918, the Central Powers were exhausted. The Allied forces launched successful offensives that pushed the German army back. Internal unrest and economic hardship also weakened the Central Powers. On November 11, 1918, Germany signed an armistice agreement. This marked the official end of the fighting. However, the formal peace process took several months. The Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1919, exactly 5 years after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh penalties on Germany. It required Germany to accept full responsibility for the war, disarm, make substantial territorial concessions, and pay reparations. These terms were intended to prevent Germany from becoming a military threat again. The Treaty of Versailles had a significant impact on the post-war world. It aimed to create a lasting peace but also sowed the seeds of future conflict. The harsh terms imposed on Germany contributed to economic hardship and political instability, leading to the rise of Adolf Hitler and World War II. Section 10. Political and social changes post-war. The end of World War I brought significant political and social changes. The collapse of empires led to new nations and a shift in power. Countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia emerged. Women played critical roles, accelerating suffrage movements. The war influenced art and literature, reflecting its horrors. Communism gained ground in Russia with the Bolshevik Revolution. Fascism and Nazism emerged from post-war turmoil. Section 11. The lasting legacy of World War I. World War I, often referred to as the Great War, shaped the 20th century. It led to significant geopolitical changes and new states. The League of Nations was established to prevent future conflicts. The economic impact was profound, with massive debts and hardship. Reparations on Germany led to hyperinflation and instability. Socially, the war impacted the generation that lived through it. It also changed the role of women and accelerated social reforms. The legacy of World War I is still felt today.